Greetings and welcome to Pinball Help. Mike here. Today I want to talk about fuses. Our little tiny friends that keep things from catching fire and blowing up. They're very, very important, especially in pinball machines. And I'm going to use as an example this game that I just recently picked up. This is a Game Plan Sharpshooter 2. Picked the game up and I noticed one of the fuses was blown. And one of the things I like to do whenever I get a new game that I'm trying to restore or repair is check all the fuses. Check to make sure they are what they say they are. Now, in this case, what we're looking at here is the main power supply where the power comes in for the game. The line voltage comes in and it's converted into a number of other voltages from the transformer, and then this is here, it's rectified into the DC. And these fuses are for the various powertrains that are going to different parts of the machine. When you see fuses in a machine and it's a new machine, you want to always check them against what they're supposed to be. Because if the previous owner was somebody who was not very sophisticated in understanding electronics, sometimes they'll just stick any old fuse in there, and that's what happened in this case. I pulled the fuse that was on the second to last over there, and it was a 7.5 amp. I researched, and it's supposed to be a 5 amp, not a 7.5 amp. So it was out of spec. Sometimes you can get away with doing that, but generally speaking, it's bad, bad, bad. It's a bad idea. Those fuses are there to limit the amount of current for a reason, so that you do not fry all of the other things up here, which are a lot more expensive to replace than fuses. So I want to remind people, check the fuses in your game, check them to make sure that they are rated for what they're supposed to be. Now in this game, if we look right up here, you can see it's right there on the side of the game. It shows what the fuse values are supposed to be. In a lot of games, you'll see that. In most pinball machines, there'll be something stuck on the inside of the head, which will tell you what the fuses are, fuse number. On Bolly Williams' game, it'll say F101, 102, 103, and they'll have, in this game, it's just the diagram is right above where the fuses are, you see. So fuses are down there on the bottom, diagram's up on the top. So we'll look up there, and what you'll see is, from left to right, there's a 20 amp fuse, then a 10 amp, then a 15 amp, then a 5 amp, then a 3 amp with an SB after it. Now what does that SB mean? That SB means it's a slow blow fuse. There's two different kinds of fuses that you'll commonly see in these games: fast blow and slow blow. If there is not an indication after the fuse, it should be a fast blow. Fast blow fuses usually just have a single filament in them. Slow blow fuses will sometimes have little windings, but you can't always go by that. You want to look on the actual fuse itself. On a slow blow fuse, and I probably can't show you, can't get this thing to focus properly, but on a slow blow fuse, you know, on the side of the edge, it'll have it along here, and it'll say something like 250V, 250 volts. Almost all fuses will be rated for 250 volts. You may see 125V or 120V. Ignore that. That's not really what's relevant. What's relevant is the amperage. So it'll say 250V, and then it'll say something like 5A or 3/4 A, which would be a 3/4 amp or a 5 amp. So you want to read that. And then it may also say something that says MDL. MDL indicates a slow blow fuse. So in this case, I'm going to replace this fuse that was blown. It had a 7.5 amp. I'm going to put the proper 5 amp in there. Now, whenever a fuse is blown in the game and you don't know why it blew, don't just replace the fuse. You want to figure out why it blew. Fuses don't typically just go accidentally. Sometimes they can. They'll eventually fail, or if the game gets banged around, sometimes the filament can break if it's a light gauge fuse. But you want to assume something else caused it. You want to investigate that. In this case, we look up here and you look at the different values for the fuses. And I'll explain commonly what these are. I'm not super familiar with game plan games, so I'm going to do a little bit more research. I haven't even read the manual, yet. This is a new architecture, but they're all somewhat similar, so I'm going to kind of fumble my way through. So from left to right, we have 6.3 VAC. That means 6.3 volts AC coming in, and it's a 20 amp fuse that's fusing that line. We know 6.3 volts is usually the general illumination, the lighting circuit. So that's the line that runs most of the lights, like in the head and around the game. Then you see on this game 24 volts, 10 amps. This game doesn't have a 50 volt line for the high power solenoid, so I'm going to assume that maybe the 24 volts are the high power solenoids. Usually it would be 50 volts or 40 volts. Then you have a 7 volt 15 amp here. I'm not sure what that is. And you have a 12 volt. And then you have the line amp. Now, on a lot of games, you'll have a 5 volt, which would be for the MPU. I'm going to assume this 7 volt is probably to power the boards, the logic. The 12 volts usually power flashers, optos, any kind of motor that you may have. It varies from game to game, but we can tell when a fuse blows, we'll know what it affects based on what voltage it was fusing. So, quick little thing, you want to check that. Now, on this game, the fuses are in one main place with an alternate fuse underneath the cabinet that probably fused just the flippers. Sometimes there'll be fuses on different boards. Sometimes there'll be fuses inside of the game cabinet. But usually the main fuses are back here in the head, and they're going to be right near the power supply. So remember, always check your fuses. Pull them out. There's a neat little tool you can get. I'll show you. This little plastic tool here, and I can use this to easily pull a fuse. So this is supposed to be a 10 amp fuse right there. So I'll pull this fuse, and then I'll take a look at it and try to read it and see what it is. Now, before I even put any power to the machine, I'm going to go through and I'm going to pull each one of these fuses, check them, and it's a good idea to check them outside of the circuit. You can check them in the game itself as a quickie check, but it's not always the best way to do it. And I'll show you how you can check your fuses. You take your meter and you turn it, and there's a continuity setting on most of these. And the way this works is you have your two leads, and when you touch them together, you get that beep, right? So when you pull a fuse, you touch these leads to either side. Wait, get a good contact. See, so I know that fuse is good. Now, if you need to, you can do this in circuit as a quickie test, where you can kind of go, let me see if I can do this without getting in the way of the camera. Do this right over here. So I can go, that's good, that's good, and touch both of them. But the right way to do it is to pull the fuse, put your meter on continuity, check each fuse individually, and then you know it's working. So again, if you got a machine, you don't know where it's been, you don't know who's worked on it, it's always important and helpful to look up the fuses, look up what value these fuses should be, pull them, test them, and replace them if they are not exactly what they are to spec. If a fuse is blown, take a good look at what it was supposed to be protecting, and watch the wires. If it's, for example, if it's a fuse on the coils, on the high power stuff, you want to go through and check a meter on all the coils and make sure that the coils are good. And I've done videos going into that. You can search. If it's for another section like the lights, you want to kind of take a look. Like, I might want to look at all of the wiring over here, see if I see anything broken or frayed, or a wire touching something that it shouldn't, because that could be possible, something like that. Or check underneath the playfield You see stuff like that there. Again, if a fuse is blown, pull that play field, look underneath the play field, see if you see any wires that are out of place that might be rubbing or touching against each other, because you don't want to just power it back up and have the fuse blow again. So just a little short helpful hint there for dealing with fuses and checking them to make sure that they are what they are supposed to be. So thank you guys for watching. For more, visit PinballHelp.com. I'm on Twitter at PinballHelp, Reddit /PinballHelp, and that's it. Thanks.